In this video, I am interviewing Eduardo from the Vue.js core team. We're doing this interview in the context of his talk at the Vue.js Global Conference. I'm doing a collaboration with the organizers where we basically get me to interview the speakers. I talk about their talk and we go in depth in the technology bit about it. And then afterwards, we finish up with some other questions. So without further ado, this is the interview with Eduardo from the Vue.js core team for Vue.js Global Conference. This interview is in context of the Vue.js Global Conference. And of course, you as a core team member who speaks on a lot of conferences, you speak on this one as well. So can you say to the audience, like, what is your talk about? And also, what will they learn?
Right. So my talk this time will be again about the router. So it will be about the new version of the router, and there are a couple things that happened in between my last talk in February about it. So this one will be more focused on the new things and how to migrate over, whereas the last one had a bigger focus on the router architecture and the changes that I brought to the new version of the router. So hopefully these, still have to prepare the talk, as you can imagine, but I do have like half of the content ready with all the things that happen in between, some RFCs. I think there are quite a few exciting things to learn and just get some practical knowledge about how to migrate your existing Vue Router code to the new version for Vue 3.
Okay, and did you have to introduce breaking changes in the new one?
Yeah, there are a few breaking changes. They're quite light, except for like the biggest change is an improvement because people were not enjoying the promise-based API. I mean, we can talk about that later if you want, but I'm trying to list them as much as I can on the repository.
Oh yeah, sure.
And of course, there are typing names that change because I think they make more sense. They could still change even though we are on RC. They won't change after on beta, of course, but on RC they can change because we're on beta, but they won't change on RC.
Sure.
And but they're unlikely to change.
Okay. And I'm wondering, did you notice any like people who doing super creative, crazy code around the router that now that you introduce those changes that they will have like some crazy amount of work? Or did you generally not see that?
No, I don't think I've seen that.
Okay, cool.
If anything, it's made some existing plugins easier to write or unnecessary.
Okay, that's nice. So did you like change the way you can have like these injection things of like before routing and after routing? Is that the main change, or is it maybe just like naming and how things are coded, or?
The whole navigation flow is pretty much the same.
Okay.
With the introduction of composition functions for before update and before leave.
Okay.
We could also add. I think that that part of the API still needs people to experiment with things and come up with ideas. But at the end, the cool part about the composition API is that we can build it on top, and it will be fully tree shakeable. So the idea is to provide things that are convenient for people, but they can be built already with the existing API of the router. I think a lot of the changes are consistency, like things are more consistent. The errors, the problems that you may see you can see them the same in different places. Encoding is better, and the biggest change is dynamic routing. There is a ranking system for the routes, so now we know how to order them basically.
Okay, because I was thinking what could be a new feature in a router, but dynamic routes could be pretty cool, of course. I was also thinking like I'm more of like an accessibility buff, so I'm always thinking about stuff like that. And recently I've seen a whole bunch of apps where you then go to the new page. But of course, if you had scrolled down already, you go to the new page, you're also scroll down on the new thing that you say. So in your router, are you taking responsibility for those kind of things to like move up the page or tell people, hey, don't forget about this kind of stuff? Or is that more something that you maybe write down in the docs and say, this is best practice?
The scroll behavior has been improved a little bit. So for instance, it's all about the navigation. Navigation now is more consistent on how it happens and the results that you get. So basically, a navigation, a push or replace returns a promise, and the promise resolves whatever happens. The promise will resolve. So if the navigation succeeds, it goes to the end, or there is a redirection in the middle, but then you get somewhere. You're actually navigating somewhere. The promise resolve with nothing. If the navigation doesn't succeed, so for example, it's aborted because you call an X false in the navigation guard, or because there is an error that happened in the middle. Oh, that's very different. Or because you there is another navigation that happened in between that was resolved first. So the pending navigation that was being resolved is just dropped.
Yeah.
Then the promise will still resolve. Or for example, you're trying to navigate to the same location, so the router says, "Well, there is nothing to change, so we just don't do anything."
Yeah.
The promise will resolve, but it will give you a navigation failure as the result value, so you can check whatever happened.
So you can work with it. That's actually a really clean solution. Well, at least there's one way to use it, and that's what's nice about it, right? And then you can also choose to do that scroll stuff or whatever. And so, go on. Sorry.
Yes, sorry. So the thing is, that's the first layer, and the thing is, now the scroll behavior happens whenever that promise resolves, and it's consistent with after each, which wasn't the case before. So basically, anytime there is a navigation, whereas it fails or anything, it will invoke the scroll behavior. So this means that you can also recreate very easily. Basically, if the same code that you may have in your application, you can use it on the new Vue router, and it will probably work better. But for example, twice on the same anchor.
It's a anchor link. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So because you're already there, the router will not create a new navigation. Right?
Oh, that's cool.
But the scroll behavior will trigger.
Right. So when you look at things like Next and what they have when you go to a new route, there's like a little loader bar on the top. Will that kind of stuff now be easier as well with the new router? And maybe it's just, if you now have a few CLI projects, for example, you can just add that kind of stuff really easily.
I think it's more consistent. It was already easy to add with the guards.
Yeah, exactly.
But you will still have to do it with the guards. Like, it's still like something that needs to be done on username.
Yeah, sure.
So it's something that we could have plugins for it. Like, for sure, it's easy to build a plugin with a router, and just pass the router instance to the plugin, and you're done.
So I remember from your previous talk about this that you were looking into how it would work with different browsers and kind of strange characters in the URL. Right? What I see lately very often is that, we have an American website, but it can also be shown in Arabic or whatever. And then URLs change, strange characters come in. Did you have to change a whole bunch for this? Or maybe you guys care less about this kind of things now because it happens less? What's the story behind that?
So there are a few angles to the problem.
Yes.
So we're dropping a lot of support for older browsers. I mean, Internet Explorer is not a browser anymore, but we support Internet Explorer 9, up to 9 in the previous version.
That's serious. Wow.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, it wasn't that serious for the time being when
exactly. This is like 2-3 years ago, right? That you started.
5.
There you go. So IE9 was still a thing.
I mean, when I wasn't even building Vue router then. It was Evan, but it was like 4 years ago, 4 or 5.
Yeah.
IE9 was still a thing back then. It's not a thing, fortunately, right now, or mostly isn't. you still have companies that need Internet Explorer 11.
Yeah, I currently have a project where I need to do 11 because it's this global thing. So people from all around the world have to use it. This time it's a React project. It's something else. Let's not touch that up now. But that's pretty interesting, right? That still happens. So did you have to do a lot of different kind of code, or maybe for Safari, which is the new IE10, right? How did that work?
I had to manually test a lot of things because even though the specifications or some RFCs are saying something about the encoding, which I also spent quite some time reading, not the whole extent of it, because they are very long.
Yeah, that's like pretty crazy how these specs are written, right?
I mean, they try to go try to go in detail, and that's perfect because when you have a specific problem, you're going to find your answer. And also for people implementing the API, which are the browsers, not me, they know how to encode things. And well, it was fun to test out things on the browsers. I basically did multiple times over the year. The whole thing happened over a year, I think, because I was rediscovering new things and trying new things. And I had my test page where I would test the different characters and see what browsers were doing, and finding some inconsistencies regarding the RFCs or the specification, but browsers being consistent among them, and realizing that there was also an RFC and the specification that were living more or less together. Internet Explorer was following the RFC, which is more strict than the specification.
Okay.
And that there are some characters that are still preserved, encoded by like prohibited on the URL without encoding. Like let's say, for example, a Unicode character has to be encoded on the URL.
Yeah.
That's always. There are some ASCII characters that also need to be encoded. So there was a character, I think it was the bracket or the curly brace, that was not required to be encoded by the specification, but was proposed to be encoded on the RFC, maybe for future use and some syntax on the URL.
Yeah.
But that never happened, or at least didn't happen yet. However, browsers are encoding it. So when you write that character on the URL, Chrome and Firefox are going to encode that value for you, so you don't send an incorrect URL. But Internet Explorer, what is funny is that it sends an encoded request, because otherwise it's not a legal request, like it's not a legal URL.
Yeah.
Legal as in spec compliant.
Yeah, sure.
Not legal stuff.
Well, legal is kind of a fun way to say it, because maybe there's some security issues there. But let's call it compliant, sure.
But the funny thing is that the some browsers like Internet Explorer give you the unencoded values, like the raw values on the JavaScript side.
Oh.
Whereas the other browsers like Firefox and Chrome, they give you the encoded value.
So on window.location, that whole object, it might sometimes be different than what you see in the URL between browsers.
Yes, that's the problem.
Wow.
The main
so
problem.
You basically wrote a big switch case, I can imagine.
No. No, you have, so there is a try catch just in case.
Sure.
And falling back on, it's just a parsing, so it's not an expensive operation. It's
exactly. Okay.
The whole Vue Router code is inside a try catch. No.
Yeah, exactly. Very interesting for the hoisting of the variables in that sense.
Forget about tree shaking.
Yeah, exactly. These kind of things, they actually matter so much when you build something that needs to work super low level and basically everybody will use it. It's pretty amazing. So you really have to think about that stuff. So did you like heavily unit test every line of this thing?
I have a lot of unit tests. I have almost 500 unit tests on the router.
Wow, awesome.
Probably some of them are like repetitions, because I do have a few loops. Like I have for example, sometimes I test the push and replace, even though replace is calling push behind the scenes.
Sure.
I did it I did it before just in case, because I wasn't sure if I would have to diverge in implementation. So I just wanted to go on a higher level test.
Yeah, this is always a bit hard. Like, when does it become an integration test? Like in this level, probably that's not true. This still works as a unit test, right?
Yeah, I have Most of my tests are integration.
Yeah, I can imagine.
What?
Well,
Yeah,
if it's super
more or
low
less.
level, it's generally just a JavaScript function, so you don't really have to
Exactly.
test it, right?
Those are just,
Hopefully.
I do test them. So for example, I test my encoding functions,
Sure.
although there isn't much to test because basically the code is very straightforward. So
Yeah.
I just write the comments above and saying we have to do this, and why, or the links, references of stuff, and then there is just a replace.
Yeah, exactly. So are you going to
statement.
just unit test the replace? That's kind of funny. But
no, I didn't. No, basically, I think I did integration tests that make sure that some results were encoded and others were not, and I didn't bother on mocking doing a unit test, mocking the function that is imported by the router. I'm just checking if it's called, and just check if the values are encoded or unencoded.
That should be fine. Like otherwise, you spend so much time on this. So I have one last question on this subject. Like you see quite often if you use Vue CLI, for example, you say, okay, I want to have it's truly going to be single page app, or it might have some SSR later. You might get different schemes for the URL, right? You get the hashbang URL that we used to see all the time. But sometimes you can just use window push or stuff like that. Did you have to do a lot of work to separate those two, or how does that work?
So in the previous version, there is a whole web hash history implementation.
Yeah, exactly.
In the current version, the web hash implementation just uses the push state API.
Oh yeah, so you just push, but with the hash attached.
Yeah.
So you keep state of the URL, and then you just push that in.
Yeah. So because the older browser that we need to support is Internet Explorer 11, and this was supported since 10. You can still use the push state API with files and with other URLs. You just need to put the whole URL first.
Okay.
When pushing. So basically,
this actually
web
nice.
History, it's
so it became much easier now.
Yeah, it was.
Because
I was so
back in the day when I didn't use Vue, or it was maybe just some alpha version, like really back in the day, we built this ourselves. So I remember doing that.
Oh yeah, you told me about it.
Man, like you don't want to be doing that kind of stuff. But yeah, Twitter did it, so why didn't we do it? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Kind of also, the hash is even more inconsistent across browsers.
It's so inconsistent. We couldn't really get it to work every time. And anyways, let's not go in the past. This is about the future. So a little bridge here, because I remember in our previous interview, so I'll put a card in the video so users can actually see that also. We briefly discussed on how open source works and how you could potentially monetize it. And since that time, we now have GitHub sponsors. Of course, Patreon is quite big. And I remember, I think you went for GitHub sponsors, right? So can you maybe explain how that went? Is this actually a solution? Or do you still need to go in crazy ways to actually make some money?
So I still have to work more or less. I do have not that much because I'm lucky enough to take some money from the Open Collective. It's probably people can see it. I take more or less an average of 3,000 euros a month on average, plus some expenses for co-working space. And that's public. There is there on the Open Collective.
Okay, so before we go on, I'm not sure if everybody knows what this Open Collective is. Could you explain it?
Oh, yeah, right. Open Collective is it's a share funds for the Vue.js organization.
Okay.
So core team members are taking money when they work. So, for example, Sodati is being paid thanks to that. He works full time on Vue.
Okay.
I'm also working full time, although I still have to do other small workshops and stuff like that to make some money on the company and pay the taxes and everything.
Yeah, sure, because you have to pay taxes because you have your own company, I guess. So it's a little bit complex, especially in Paris. Okay, so
I guess I don't know.
So for now, you get it from Open Collective, which is
plus the sponsors, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about the sponsors a little bit, because me personally, I'm pretty interested in how that works. Because right now I make all these YouTube videos, but it's a lot of effort, right? And if I got a little bit of help, I could do so much more. It's not like I need money for what I do. No, I need money to get it to the next level, let's say, which is maybe a different approach to what you have. But can you talk to me about, your experience in that field?
Well, the sponsorship, GitHub sponsor is pretty smooth. They pay you through Stripe. Depends on the country, I think, but
Okay.
Maybe not. Maybe they pay always through Stripe, and then it's automatic. So basically, when I reach a certain threshold on GitHub, they pay to Stripe, and then you get paid to your bank. So there is a very, very small percentage that is taken off for.
Yeah, so Stripe takes like a fee for transferring, right?
Yeah, probably, yeah. A small fee, quite small, probably small percent.
Is that the same as these other payment systems like PayPal do?
Probably, yeah,
Okay.
probably.
Okay.
So then, well, you set up your tiers pretty much like Patreon.
Yeah.
And then, well, you have to promote yourself to get some sponsors.
Yeah.
Which
So
is what I've been
are you doing what other
bad
Patreons do? Like you're going to get some behind the scenes footage and then you become a patron and you see more about me. Or like, how does that work for you when you do open source work like this?
Yeah, I think I want, I wish I could go like Evan, but it's not going to happen. For example, Evan is able to work full time and he doesn't have to worry about it. He doesn't have to worry about creating extra content for the people. He's already building Vue, and that's already serving all the people. If you look at other people, they try to provide some extra value to the people who are sponsoring. So, for example, they release content, or Guillaume does that also. I think he does some private content, like content that is only accessible for people who are sponsoring him.
Ah, okay, that's pretty interesting. But it's still on you. Sorry, go on.
I don't know what is the content exactly. I know that he did that on Patreon, but I don't know if he does that for GitHub sponsors.
Yeah, I'm pretty interested in how it works because it kind of is still on you yourself to get people in to sponsor, right? But that's kind of part of the game, I guess.
Exactly. I think that's part of the game. And there was this article recently is about 3 weeks ago. The guy's named Caleb Ponzio, I think.
Okay.
So basically, he explained, the article is really nice. He explains how he gets there and what worked for him. So basically, what works the best for him is providing content that is specific to the software he's building and giving for free. He's open source. And just providing that content for people who are sponsoring him, which is what he calls sponsorware.
It's interesting. It's a nice fit with the name. This guy knows his marketing. That's nice.
Yes, he's not. Yeah, he seems to be good.
Yeah. So I'll put that link in the description so people can follow the article.
Sure. And so it's interesting because he provides educational content. Basically, that's what.
Okay.
Screencasts.
Okay. Would you do something similar? Because
so I'm thinking about doing something similar, like on very specific topics about the router or Vue or Next. Mostly things about the router, but not necessarily only. And making them available for sponsors who are above a certain, how do you call that?
Certain tier.
A tier.
Yeah, exactly. Because I can imagine, let's say you have certain tiers and you work with some company, like where I work with Valtech, for example, and we have some complicated project. I can imagine instead of paying you whatever for support meetings, we could actually sponsor you a certain tier and then we get more personalized help. To me, that sounds like a really nice model.
Yeah, but I wouldn't do that. Apparently that doesn't work very well.
Okay, good to know.
That's what John later? His name is pronounced like that. Vuetify's author.
Yes.
Told me that thing it wasn't that attractive for people at the end.
Okay, interesting.
If I want to provide, I see that a lot of people do that on the sponsors. I don't know if I have it. If I want to provide some pet support, I would just do consulting because I can do it.
Yeah, sure. Because consulting is likely it's better for money, I can imagine.
Yes, probably. But it's also because it's just more straightforward.
Yeah.
A company is just paying a service.
Exactly.
It's in the flow of how they want to get help.
Exactly.
And I can do it. Other developers cannot because maybe they are not working as freelancers as I am.
Yeah, exactly. You have this kind of freedom where you can kind of move around and do what you need at the right moment. but you created that freedom for yourself. So that's also something people can aspire to, right?
Yeah.
So just before the interview, you said that you might be working on a project to ease this kind of sponsorship thing. And I know you didn't finish, so let's not go too deep, but can you describe it a little bit, or at least what is your idea?
So my idea is I have content that is more advanced or that is very practical. That doesn't really fit a documentation, but is more about it's educational content, basically.
Yeah.
So it could be articles, it could be videos. I like videos. I like the format. But I don't want to go to the level, or like the quality level is one thing you could say. Quality level of a course, maybe like a full-fledged course that you could find in Vue Mastery or a Vue School. I don't want to maybe go that deep, but I want to cover topics and show them and talk about it.
Yeah.
And show how to do it in a more casual way.
So it's like
something more
mini
accessible
talks for people, kind of mini conference talks, kind of. We touch on a subject, we go slightly deeper, and then people have a good
coding.
feeling.
Like basically, it's
watching.
live coding and solving an issue, implementing something, and showing how to do it. It could be like an article, but I mean, I probably also do articles. So the thing is, I want to give that to some people who are sponsoring me a certain amount, like $10 or a bit more. Probably $10 is already good.
Yeah.
And to do that, so to restrict the content for your sponsors, I need to build something to make it work. Otherwise, what do? I just send emails or I send a newsletter.
Yeah, it's kind of strange. So you're going to build your own Patreon, but with nicer technology. Probably.
No, I rely on GitHub sponsors.
Ah, cool. Okay.
So I can check. I check if people are sponsoring me, so I can show them the content.
So GitHub sponsors has like an API or some hooks that you can hook into.
They have an API and they have hooks. Well, I'm building the platform. I'm building it for myself, but at the end, I can just add a little bit of code to make it work for other people. So other developers who also have GitHub sponsorship.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing, basically. I'm building something that will help other people who have a sponsorship to make it easier to share and restrict access to content.
Cool. So if I have a GitHub account, I can go once your service is done, of course, I can log in with GitHub. And then it knows me and it sees if I have this sponsorship thing going on, and it can set up my stuff, basically.
It's a bit different. It's more about if you want to check someone else's content.
Okay.
The platform will let you do it or not based on you will be able to log in with GitHub, and then I will be able to check if you can see the content or not.
Okay, cool.
And other people can post content after logging in with GitHub, and limit the access to the content.
Okay, this is pretty exciting. Because I'm looking into all this sponsorship stuff and how it could work and where to do it from and who takes the least chunk of your money if somebody donates, how the politics are. It's not an easy system to navigate within. But yeah, it's nice if smart people take it upon themselves to put something in place and using the backbones of stuff that already works well. Well, that's always interesting to me. You don't want to reinvent the wheel, of course, but it's still an interesting approach. So, Eduardo, thank you very much for joining me today. And I hope to see you in person soon.
Yeah, hopefully. Well, we're living in the same city, so.
Yeah, soon. All right. Cheers, man. Bye.
Goodbye. Thank you for having me.